Hello everyone. My name is Hans Goede, and today I'm presenting about being a kernel subsystem maintainer and creating a healthy, vibrant subsystem community. So I am a principal software engineer at Red Hat, mostly focusing on Linux hardware enablement, so mostly driver-related stuff. Recently I've been focusing on laptops and MIPI cameras. I've been the subsystem maintainer for what we call platform drivers x86 in the kernel since 2020. And I would like to try to make this a bit interactive. I also don't think I have enough slides to fill 40 minutes, so I hope we can have some discussion. So if you have any questions during the talk, please raise your hand. So today's topics, I'll try to give my vision on how to create a friendly mailing list. How to grow a community, then something about maintainer burnout and my personal experience with burnout, and handing over the reins, because I'm currently more of a backup maintainer. I actually already handed over the reins to someone else, more on that later. So making your mailing list a friendly, welcoming medium. So kernel mailing lists, or the kernel community, whatever, has a bad reputation, and it's seen that sometimes mails can be rude or unfriendly. That has been changing lately, changing for the better. But it's still, I think, a reputation issue, at least which we have, that it's seen as scary to go to a mailing list and send an email. So I think it's important as a kernel maintainer to try and lead by example and make sure that the mailing list is seen as friendly. So one of the first things there is always stay professional. So sometimes a question may seem stupid, but that's probably just always also, as I say, at the bottom bullet point, try to put yourself in the other shoes, right? So it's, yeah, a question may seem stupid, but maybe the other person just doesn't understand things. He doesn't have the knowledge you have, so don't get into this reflex of, oh, this is a stupid question and I'm really busy and I have a really high workload, so I'm just going to write an ugly mail that's a stupid question. So always stay professional, always stay friendly. And patience is a virtue, right? This is also part of it, right? This reflex of, oh, this is like my 5th stupid email today or whatever. Take a deep breath, count to 10, be patient. In the end, and that's also part of the always assume good intentions, even if you have to explain something for the 3rd or 4th time. In the end, both the contributor and you are trying to improve the kernel. So you both have the same end goals, so always keep that in mind. I believe that is very important. And again, try to put yourself in the other shoes. Try to remember when you were writing your first kernel patch many, many times ago. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide. I've also noticed that a language barrier can be a real problem, right? For me, English is not my native language, but I've grown up with English movies on TV, and because the Netherlands is a small country, so we don't overdub, we don't replace the voices on TV, right? So I've always had English television, English books, English magazines. On the internet, everything is in English. And English is pretty close to Dutch, actually, in a way. So for me, English is not really a problem, but I noticed that for some contributors it can really be a problem. Some rules which I use for myself to help overcome the language barrier is try to use short, clear sentences. Engineers often have the tendency, I noticed, to write really long sentences with sub-sentences to clarify words, and then a sub-sentence in the sub-sentence. So try to avoid that, try to be concise. I use lots of paragraphs instead of a big wall of text, especially if you do all the sub-sentences thing, it becomes a big wall of text. So try to avoid that also. Sometimes if you feel the need to clarify, what can help is make a footnote. So put like a 1 between parentheses and then put a footnote below to clarify it if you feel that that might help. Often, especially if you're debugging something with a user, if you're more like doing bug triaging than reviewing a patch, or sometimes if you're asking for changes to a patch, you want multiple things at the same time, right? You want, if you're debugging, you want this log and you want this log, and you want the user to try this and that and that. So what I've noticed what really helps is if you just make a numbered list, like I need the following information from you, and then 1 dot, and then the first log, and then 2 dot. And also put white lines between the numbered items to clearly separate them. So these are just really simple tricks, but they help to to overcome like the language barrier, right? So if you ask for 5 things in a bunch of sentences in a wall of text, some of the things you're asking for are going to get overlooked. So it's better to do it like this. Very important, I also think, everything I mentioned, like staying professional, staying friendly, be patient, that is especially important if you're having a bad day for whatever reason, right? If you got out grumpy, you slept poorly or whatever, or your workload is just through the roof, and you're frustrated about that, then those rules I just gave apply doubly so, right? It's really important to even then stay friendly. So maintainers, I think, also should always lead by example, right? We want to change this grumpiness and shortness and burning other people down because we don't like a patch or whatever on the list. We want to, right? Also, if you give criticism on a patch, right, criticize the contents and not the person, and try to give positive criticism. So not only say like, don't do it this way, but maybe suggest a better way, or even maybe give some example code, especially if you're dealing with a new contributor. So something about miscommunication, which what I've noticed is that also due to the language barrier, but even without the language barrier, is that because of email is not the ideal medium, right? There is a time difference. You're not seeing a face. You have no idea what the other person is exactly. The miscommunication happens, right? That someone says something and you think he is disagreeing with you, but he was actually agreeing, but you're reading it wrong, or something like that. This happens, and usually in a follow-up message, you'll notice that, so he didn't mean it that way, or they didn't mean it that way. So I have this 3-step system to deal with miscommunication. First, just notice that there is a miscommunication and also write so in your reply, like, hey, I noticed that there was a bit of miscommunication, that we misunderstood each other. Then explain how you originally interpreted the other's message. So basically say like, oh, I thought you were disagreeing with me, so this is why I wrote this long rambling mail of why I was right or why I think my way is better. Then explain that you now understand that the other person was actually agreeing with you, and then suggest how to move forward, which, if the case actually was the example of disagreeing versus agreeing, moving forward is easy, right? But sometimes it can be the other way around. So yeah, I think that this really helps to just, again, don't get grumpy, right? Also, don't play the blame game, right? Was the other's email unclear, or were you just reading it wrong? It doesn't matter. Miscommunication is just something which happens. It happens all the time. But in real life, it's really easy to like in a couple of seconds, figure out that you're misinterpreting each other, and over email with the time difference and not seeing someone face to face. This happens more often. So I also think it's important here to not blame anyone, neither the sender nor the receiver. So any questions so far? As I said, I would like to make this a bit interactive. Not that much of you, so. Yes. Okay, so the question is, if you have to explain something a lot of times, then when do you decide to put it into documentation? And if you put it in documentation, is just sending a link to the documentation then unfriendly, or is that just okay to do? So very good question, thank you. First of all, I must admit that I'm not that good in if I have to repeat something a lot of times in putting it in the documentation. Although some of it, like adding a sign of by to a patch, already is in the documentation, but there's just too much documentation. What I do have is I have a bunch of canned answers, so sort of copy and paste answers, which usually also start with a sentence like, this is a template reply. So it may not exactly apply to the current situation, and then I just copy and paste the template reply. So I do that. But I think we could indeed do better with documentation. On the other hand, again, there is already so much. If we're specifically talking about submitting kernel patches, the submitting patches documentation is already really big. One could argue too big. One could argue it should be split in sort of like how to submit kernel patches 101 and then a 201 with all the details, maybe. But I'm not a documentation guy. So yeah, good question. Yeah.
I agree completely with the approach of friendliness and explaining the contributors things. However, such approach takes probably more time than just saying this is not correct, fix this. So how do you find time as a maintainer to be the friendly, growing, respectful contributors? And this can be job and this is your person.
Okay, so the question is that there is agreement that it's good to be friendly and help newcomers, but how do you find the time? Another very good question, thank you. So I was lucky that, well, for one, that I got paid to be a subsystem maintainer, so I could use some of my boss's time for it. And on the other hand, also that Drivers Platform x86 is not that big a subsystem. Especially in the beginning, the mailing list volume was relatively low. On the other hand, I'm actually mentioned this on my next slide. So the last bullet, some hand-holding may be necessary, and this effort doesn't always pay itself back. It's also a bit of a scattershot approach, right? You try to help each newcomer to get his patch in and to maybe become a contributor and stick around, and some do and some don't. I had the positive experience, or maybe the lucky experience, that I ended up with 2 community contributors who were doing a lot of review, and some of them even took over some subparts of the subsystem and doing most of the work there, and they're also now helping with bug triaging, so that was a really great experience. Which I think was partly made possible just by being open and friendly, and also in the beginning when I noticed that there was too much work for me and that they were working in a specific area, asking them like, you have done a bunch of work in this area, and there are some new patches in this area, I'm busy, could you maybe help by reviewing them? But yeah, it's very tricky. It's sort of, if you are a maintainer who gets too much patches and you're over your head, then it's very hard to make time to coach newcomers to help get some, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? You need to delay reviewing some important patch sets to help grow that community so that in the end they can maybe help with review some of the patches. And I think that this also goes on to my next subject of maintainer burnout. I think that it's, we really have an issue that we don't have enough maintainers, and that maintainers are not all maintainers are in a lucky position that they're paid. For me it was like 1 day a week, but still that was a lot for, or enough for most of the work which I was doing. So yeah, this is really tricky. Again, if you're already in over your head, it's really hard to, but I think at a minimum at least, I can understand that you maybe don't have the time to handhold newcomers, but at a minimum try to stay professionals, try to stay friendly, right? You could even just have a canned reply like, sorry, I'm over my head, I have too much work, I cannot help you with this. Please see if you can find someone else who can maybe help you with getting this driver in the mainline kernel. Right, so just be honest. I think that's also very important, right? Be honest. Also expectation management, right? Sometimes I had a newcomer coming in with a new patch or a new driver, and I think this is great, but it's going to need a lot of work. And currently I'm very busy at work with other stuff, so I just would say to them like, it's great, I'll get back to you in a month. Or whatever, right? So expectation management, be honest. Expectation management could also just be say like, sorry, I don't have the time to counsel newcomers. It sucks to say that, but I think it's better to say that than to just let a patch hit. Right, that's the worst experience for the newcomer. And maybe you can try and point them to someone else who has similar experience and maybe has more bandwidth. Does that answer your question? Great. Okay, so we sort of organically moved to the growing a community slide. So first of all, we have created a friendly and welcoming mailing list, which we just discussed. What I also notice is that some maintainers, and this is also a personal style, but I'm personally not a fan of it, many personally in this sentence, is they tend to nitpick patches like, oh, you're not using a comma for the terminating element of a struct initializer, so if you need to initialize another field, you need to add a comma that will make the div bigger, add a comma. Like nitpicks like that, right? Or the commit message is not perfect or whatever. I can understand if you do that with seasoned developers, but for newcomers I think that's not a pleasant experience, right? There might be serious work which needs to happen on a patch, but if it's just adding a comma or massaging the commit message a baby, maybe just go the extra mile as maintainer, which might actually be less work for you too, because otherwise you might get a V2 and a V3 and a V4 and whatever, which in the end also ends up being more work for you and you need to context switch all the time. Just take the patch, just fix up the nitpicks, say that you fixed them up, point it out how it looks now. Maybe send a link to the commit in your tree so they can look at how it looks now. So yeah, because you want to give newcomers, I think, that a positive experience when they get their patch upstream, and also you want to give them like that little boost of like, yes, I got my first patch upstream, right? You want to hook them. You want them to get the feeling like, oh, this is fun, this is cool. I contributed to the big Linux kernel, which is used everywhere. So now I can get more. I want to get more patches in. This is cool. And getting a reply like your commit message doesn't end in a dot, please send a new version, that's not cool. That doesn't give them that experience. So I think it's important to be careful with the nitpicking, especially for newcomers. The hand-holding thing we already discussed with the question, right? And newcomers will require hand-holding. This takes time and effort that doesn't always pay itself back. Yeah, this is a problem, right? So, and the problem here is basically, again, that we don't have enough maintainers, or maintainers have a day job instead of that being a maintainer is their day job. So before we had the curl talk about all the car brands who are not contributing anything to curl, yeah, I think we need to get this message out more, that all these big companies who are literally earning billions using open source need to contribute back more. And one way to contribute back could be hiring maintainers. So something else which I think is really important, which I try to always do, is show appreciations when contributors help out, but also to the newcomers, right? I always start a patch review with thank you for your patch. Very simple, but just, right? And if people review my patches, I always say thank you for your review. So, but also if a contributor who's been around a bit longer starts reviewing other patches, send them an off-list mail or maybe on-list mail just saying thank you, right? Like, oh, it's great that you're helping me out. I appreciate this a lot. I think this is so underrated that just saying thank you to someone just does a lot. And also, delegate, right? I mentioned before that I started getting a couple of community contributors on board on doing more maintenance tasks just by saying like, oh, you've done a lot of work in this area. The area was WMI, Windows Management Interfaces. And it would be great if you could help with review this patch, or if you could look at this bug for me. And that actually worked, right? I mean, you won't always be 2020, right? Sometimes you ask for help and they'll say, sorry, I'm too busy, or things like that. But yeah. So yeah, I think that's something which we all also, on the one hand, there's this maintainer overload. On the other hand, I have the feeling that, or I know for myself that sometimes I have the feeling like I need to do this myself because no one else understands it or is capable of, or bringing someone else up to speed is too much work. But that's sort of a trap, right? If you get in that direction that you need to do, you don't scale. You need to scale it to other people. So before we move on to this fun subject, any questions?
Yes, I have one question about repeating. If I understand correctly, you means that a maintainer should fix small bugs or small typos instead of this original auto patch and apply this. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, you of course keep the original outer, right, and the original signed off by, right? You want to attribute them for their work. But if it's just like a comma missing at the end of a struct, at the last struct initializer, if you're using name struct initializer, or a dot at the end of the commit message, don't ask them to do a new revision. That actually also, I also think actually that that's really weird that some maintainers do that, because I think in the end it also costs you as a maintainer more time. Because when the new revision comes in, you need to sort of redo the review. Whereas as you immediately apply it, you don't, right? You need to context switch, like, oh, this was this patch, what was happening with it again, and things like that, so yeah. But that's also a personal maintainer style. So I know some maintainers find it very important that their contributors in their subsystem get this right. And they will ask for a new version, which I think is fine if you're doing that with seasoned contributors. But if you're asking a newcomer to just add a dot at the end of the commit message, I think you're not giving them a good first experience, right? And we want to give them a good first experience so they stick around.
So it's applying only to very, very small fixes and not to patch structure or refactoring.
Right. If the patch actually needs work, or even if there's something like an off by one bug in a for loop, I would probably also ask them to fix that themselves so they also see like, I was off there. Right? This is just really the nitpicking, something like you could apply it as is and nothing will go wrong. And
yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. So maintainer burnout. Kernel, we already touched a bit on this. I mostly want to talk on my personal experience on the next slides, but kernel maintainers are after being over-asked, right? This is also something which I have the feeling we put up on ourselves. Once you become a subsystem maintainer, you start feeling very, very responsible. It also takes a certain kind of person to grow into this role, and these are often people which have this tendency to then feel responsible for everything, right? They want to do everything perfect, at least I always want to do everything almost perfect. Remember, perfect is the enemy of good, right? You want to aim for good enough. Perfect doesn't exist. So having a healthy community and being able to delegate to trusted or community members around for longer can help here. This is of course not like the solution, right? I mean, again, I had a relative small subsystem where this worked well, but if you have a subsystem where you have like a fire hose of patches, then you really need like a second experienced developer who maybe gets paid by a company to help you out with that fire hose and with reviewing, right? And then, I mean, let's for example take the media subsystem, drivers media. I think we have a bit of a maintainer problem there. There is a big fire hose of patches, and I don't think we have enough reviewer capacity. Although we're working to a multi-committer model, which might help, but still. What would be ideal there if we have like a seasoned developer who would actually get paid by some company who's interested in this to help out with the patch review, right? And he doesn't even have to be seasoned in drivers media already, right? Just as he has some kernel experience. I mean, if you know he's getting paid to do this 2 or 3 days a week, then you can invest time to coach them to get them up to speed. Because you know he'll stick around because he's paid for it. So I don't want to claim that just having the healthy community and being friendly will magically fix the overworked maintainer problem, not at all. But it might help. It will give you a bit of a backstop if you have community members who you can ask for help. Also, what I've noticed personally for me, with my, let's call it a mini burnout a while ago, is that it wasn't the kernel maintainer stuff which caused me to burn out. It wasn't even also the technical aspects of my day job at Red Hat on top of that. It was more other factors, like do you feel in control of your day, right? Do you have the feeling that you are a boss over your own time, that you can schedule your own time, set your own priorities and things like that? Or has that been taken away by some big gray company process which is unclear, where you just have become a cog in the machine and you have to do what the machine says, even if you think it's not productive or whatever? I guess that's also a big part of it, right? Do you feel productive at the end of your workday? Or do you have the feeling you are only spinning your wheels on useless administrative tasks? At least for me personally, those are factors. So I had the unlucky and lucky experience that someone near and dear to me had a pretty hefty burnout, and they are only now fully recovering. So I sort of knew the symptoms, I knew what to look for. I know that to not do what they did, which is doubt, should I pull on the emergency brake, should I call in sick, change jobs, whatever, but instead go on until you crash. Don't do that. Right? Try to recognize the symptoms early and pull that emergency brake early. So yeah, it was not a nice experience, but for me it was useful in that I could recognize it and see like, oh, so this is what a really bad burnout looks like. I do not want this to happen to me like ever. So in March 2023, I recognized some clear burnout symptoms in myself. I haven't listed any here. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but yeah, for me it was things like being continually on edge, having a very short fuse, being tired all the time, not having energy, but mostly the being continually on edge and being annoyed by little things more than usual. So yeah, and just knowing that I needed this needed to happen to sort of set me off like in an angry mood and have a bad day the entire day. And then you have bad days every day, and that doesn't help. So causes for me were sort of like feeling loss of control, not feeling appreciated, not feeling very productive, not feeling heard. This was in this case all work related. There were also personal factors, that I have a number of family members for which I also sort of have a caretaker role, my parents mostly, who are elderly now, and unfortunately austerity measures in the Netherlands means that the Dutch government sort of expect that the children partly take care of their elder parents. So that was also a factor, but that wasn't, it's always the combination, right? It's the workload, it's the kernel maintainership for which you feel very responsible, but you don't have the feeling that you can spend all the time on it you want to spend on it, that you're not giving it the attention it deserves. It's the taking care of my parents, and it was also just the not feeling in control at my work anymore. So since I saw what a bad burnout looks like, I intervened quickly. I reported myself sick at work because most of the not feeling in control, not feeling appreciated was work related. I said to them basically like, yeah, this is not going in the right direction. I'm also lucky, I guess, that I'm from a European country where we have proper worker rights and labor protection and things like that. So I could just say like, oh, yeah, no, this isn't working for me. My work is making me sick. I'm calling in sick. I ended up only being on full sick leave. In the Netherlands, we have special doctors who you need to go to from if you're sick because of work, and they said like, well, you intervened quickly enough, we need to make some changes at your work. I asked for changes at work, and my management chain at Red Hat responded properly and made the changes, which was really great. So yeah, I ended up only being on full sick leave for 3 weeks and then slowly built back up to my regular work hours of 36 hours a week over a period of 7 weeks. So what I want to give to you as audience here is, if you recognize burnout symptoms, if you're feeling on edge all the time, you're annoyed by little things, very tired, but again, look it up, I'm not a medical professional, intervene as soon as possible and ask for help. Could be asking for professional help, asking at work, asking someone close to you to help you, or just talk to them about it, whatever. Do something, don't keep on that treadmill, right? Modern life can feel a bit of a rat race, right? So don't stay in that rat race. Do something, intervene before you get too far into the burnout and recovery really becomes a very long trajectory. Also, some people may, unfortunately, there still is this culture that mental illness is not really illness. And burnout is more of a mental thing, so some people will say, like, I cannot take sick days or sick leave because of mental illness. Of course you can. It's just as much being sick as physical illness. And in the end, you also get physical symptoms, right? If you go too long, you'll get your neck and shoulders will how do you say that? Your muscles there will get stuck, and you might get headaches from that and whatever, or your stomach gets really upset. The stress, because burnout is also about having too much stress all the time, right? It will find a way in your body somewhere. So if you wait too long, it will become a physical illness. And this is a tricky one. Again, I have the luxury that I'm from a European country where I can actually just say, sorry, I'm sick, and I don't have like a limited number of sick days a year. If the causes are work-related, let your work know, right? And try to work with them to fix things, right? To change things, to make your work fun again. But for me also, I think what's really important is that I really love open source, I really love Linux, so I give it my all. But that also makes it very important, giving it my all, that I have like I get positive energy out of it at the end of the day, so that the next day I can give it my all again. And also, as my manager once said, you shouldn't try to give it your all. You shouldn't be going 100% every day. You need some buffers. I'm still working on that, like going only 90% every day. So yeah, that was my personal burnout story. I hope just at least one person here in the room or one person who sees the recording recognizes maybe something like this and pull that emergency brake. If you recognize this, it's the same basically, like this is an interesting jump my mind just made, right? But if you're doing software design, if you look at the software design cycle, right? You have getting user requirements, then making the design, then actually coding it out, then testing, then roll out. We all know, or we should all know, that the earlier in this phases you detect that you didn't get the user requirements right or whatever, that you have an issue, the cheaper it is to fix in man-hours. The same here. The earlier you diagnose that something isn't going well, that your mental health is suffering because of whatever, usually because of a combination of factors, intervene. Right? It will only get more expensive, and expensive in a very nasty way, and it will take you a long, long time to recover if you don't intervene in time. So, any questions on this subject? Yeah, go ahead. Ah, interesting question. So the question was, for the recording, so I mentioned as one of the points that causes for me were not feeling appreciated, not feeling heard. And the question was like, if you have community co-maintainers or just co-maintainers in a kernel subsystem, how do you ensure that those feel appreciated and feel heard? Yeah, looking back at my time, honestly, I may not have done that enough. I always say thank you, but I really appreciate, for example, Armin Wolf, who has taken over most of the WMI stuff. So Armin, I don't think you're in the room, but if you hear this, I really appreciate what you've done there and what you're still doing there. Also, all the BIOS and ACPI table issues you're helping users debug. It's really great. So yeah, what I'm doing now, but then maybe also with an off-list mail or an on-list mail, I think, yeah, showing appreciation could just be simple saying thank you, right? And just, it's definitely something which is important to do as a maintainer. I mentioned it before, I don't think we do this enough, right? We sort of are so busy with just getting patches merged, getting bugs fixed, that we forget these important interhuman aspects, right? Of just showing appreciation to others that they are contributing, that they are helping out. So yeah, very good point, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, so after my, what I call my mini burnout, because I was sort of recovered in 10 weeks, one of the things I worked with my new manager at Red Hat was trying to also reduce the buzz factor of 1, right? I think one of the issues we have is there are a lot of buzz factors of 1 in open source projects, right? This one, we saw the famous user, it's not user friendly, it's XKCD comic before with the small project holding up the big pile. So one of the things which I wanted to do after that experience was sharing the maintainer workload with someone else for the platform driver 686, even though it's a small subsystem. Again, it's not a very big subsystem. And I noticed that a lot of the patches were coming from Intel, because they have things like the platform management controllers and a bunch of telemetry stuff and everything which all sits in platform driver x86. They have a lot of code there. Recently, since AMD is getting more and more into the data center, they also have a lot of code now there, but back then it was slightly more Intel. So I asked Intel, like, yo, you submit a lot of patches and that takes a lot of my bandwidth. Can you provide a seasoned, an experienced developer who can help with co-maintaining? So Intel has an employee called Ilpo Jarvinen, and they were so kind to give Ilpo time to help me out. And he's been co-maintaining platform driver x86 with me since September 2023. And actually, in the beginning, we swapped roles per kernel cycle, right? So one cycle, I would do all the bug fixes because I had done the main merge request for that cycle. And then he would do all the patch review and merging for the next cycle. And then we swap roles again. I asked him around May this year, because I'm getting more and more involved in drivers media with all the MIPI camera stuff, and I said before, I think we have a reviewer problem there. If he had bandwidth to fully switch to the maintainer role. So that has happened since May. Ilpo is now the primary. I'm mostly there as a backup for when he's on vacation or something and we need a quick bug fix to get to Linus. And also, I think it's good to have me as backup because we don't want a bus factor of 1. And this allows me to focus more on the video for Linux side, which is good because we have a lot of work there. So yeah, that's it for me. So any more questions, discussion points? Otherwise, I see I have still 4 minutes on the clock, so we have 4 minutes for questions.
So when you say that you asked the company to provide the did you like just directly email Ilpo or email the manager or?
So platform drivers x86 used to be maintained by Intel, by Andy Shevchenko, and then he asked me to step in because he didn't have the bandwidth, so I mailed Andy and he internally. So I had like an in. Which, yeah, I don't think you can just mail like info@intel.com and say, yo, I want a subsystem co-maintainer. Unfortunately. So yeah, but a good question, yes. Any more questions? No, well, thank you for your time.